Government move to better protect foreign domestic helpers. Timothy Tong grilled by lawmakers over lavish hospitality spending, and violence in Egypt mars third anniversary of Hosni Mubarak's ouster.
Good evening. Labour Chief Matthew Cheung says the government is considering measures to better protect the rights of foreign domestic helpers. Among them, a compulsory induction course for new arrivals. As Hong Kong investigators return from Indonesia, where they collected information in Oiana Sulistyaningsi's abuse case, the government here wants to make sure something like this never happens again. Many Indonesians who come to Hong Kong as domestic helpers have to take a training course back home, learning everything from Chinese cooking to Cantonese. But the course could cost them months of wages, indebting many of them to the agencies that arrange the training. Some firms also lend money to helpers to pay for the course. And when these agencies are their only point of contact in a new city, it can render these foreigners helpless here. Speaking to TVB News today, Secretary for Labour and Welfare Matthew Cheung suggested holding an induction course for all new foreign domestic helpers as part of efforts to better protect their rights.
I'm still thinking seriously about the idea of requiring them to attend a half-day course run by the Labour Department. And during the particular course, we'll impress on them their rights. For example, do not allow people to take away your passports. Your labour rights, in case you run into a problem, exploitation, abuse, how to contact the Labour Department, how to contact the consulate, and also the immigration police and so on.
Citing the case of a domestic helper who fell out of a flat while cleaning windows just days ago, Cheung said it would be a good chance to give them a briefing on work safety as well. He also promised to step up the monitoring of agencies and look into requiring them to take a proactive approach in making sure the helpers they placed are in safe hands. Cheung also wants to ban agencies from engaging in money lending. Meanwhile, the police chief assured the public today that assault cases involving foreign domestic helpers have been rare.
In the past few years, we only had, on average, 30 to 40 such cases reported to us. Compared to a population, a domestic helper population of well over 300,000.
But protesters who took to the streets today, rallying for better rights for foreign domestic helpers, said there may be cases that go unreported until it's too late.
Legislative Council's Select Committee today began investigating former ICAC Chief Timothy Tong's spending on overseas visits, entertainment and gifts when he was in office. Tong expressed regret over the scandal but insisted it had nothing to do with greed. Rani Samtani has more.
After he was grilled by the LegCo Public Accounts Committee earlier, Timothy Tong appeared before lawmakers again, this time at the LegCo Select Committee over lavish hospitality spending when he headed the anti-graft body.
Has been one meeting after the other, or might I say, one meeting over and over. But over the same matters, what more can I say? What more can I do? I worked hard. There were imperfections, inadequacies, especially over the past few months, a good measure of regrets. But it got nothing to do with greed or corruption, nor is it a matter of integrity.
Tong said he did not remember the amount of gifts he received while in office. Some lawmakers were concerned about how he distinguished between gifts given to him in a public and private capacity.
During official occasions with official dealings, this person might give me something and address me as ICAC Commissioner Mr. Tong or Commissioner Tong, and I would regard it as receiving it in my official capacity, and this will be handed over to ICAC for handling. As Commissioner, I am particularly cautious. I would gently decline any gifts received in my personal capacity. Did I receive any such gifts during official occasions? Yes, I did. After receiving such gifts, I would seek approval from the chief executive, and I needed to go through some procedures.
Tong also admitted to have dined with members of the National People's Congress and the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference. But he denied they discussed a role for him in the public sector after he retired from the anti-graft agency. Tong was later named a local CPPCC member. Because of time constraints, some lawmakers didn't get the chance to finish questioning Tong. As a result, Select Committee Chairman Ip Kwok Kim said Tong may be asked to come back again at a later date. Meanwhile, ICAC Commissioner Simon Pei will be invited to the committee's next hearing on March 1st. Rani Samtani, TVB News.
And turning overseas now, an al-Qaeda-inspired group in Egypt has claimed responsibility for a series of bomb attacks that killed 6 people in Cairo yesterday. The violence comes as the country marks the 3rd anniversary of the revolt against former President Hosni Mubarak. Sonia Artero reports.
The moment the first bomb exploded was caught on security camera. It captured a white truck parked in front of Cairo's main security headquarters. Once the driver fled in another car, the bomb exploded. Across the city, 3 more bombs wreaked deadly havoc yesterday. And today, another bomb went off. This one exploded near the Police Training Institute in Cairo, but no casualties were reported. A militant group called Supporters of Jerusalem owned up to yesterday's attacks in online forums. Their message to Muslims: stay away from enemy headquarters and security centers. The Muslim Brotherhood quickly condemned the violence, saying they had nothing to do with the bombings. Still, those enraged over the chaos triggered fighting around the country, leaving at least 14 more people dead. The upheaval in Egypt never seems to cease. It was 3 years ago today, pro-democracy demonstrators crammed into Tahrir Square to force out then-President Hosni Mubarak. Many Egyptians criticized the military's clumsy stewardship for eventually giving way to an elected Islamist president, Mohammed Morsi of the Muslim Brotherhood. That is, until mass protests once again prompted the military to step in and remove Morsi last July. Even more protests by those for and against Morsi are expected to converge on Tahrir Square today. The historic uprising against Mubarak united much of the country in a common goal. Now, deep divisions have spread like a cancer, casting great doubt over Egypt's future. Sonia Artero, TVB News.
Thailand's ruling party has hinted it would consider postponing the snap election set for February 2nd if the opposition Democratic Party agrees to participate. That scenario, however, appears unlikely to happen. The Democrats have been leading weeks of protest demanding the resignation of caretaker Prime Minister Yingluck Shinawatra. The party plans to boycott the election, demanding political reform before there's any new vote. Thailand's Constitutional Court ruled yesterday the country's election commission has the authority to postpone the ballot. Ukraine President Viktor Yanukovych has offered to reshuffle his cabinet and amend sweeping anti-protest laws in concessions to protesters. But the opposition leaders swept that aside, demanding his resignation. Alan Buknia has more.
Anti-government demonstrations continued today as protesters burned barricades just a few hundred meters from the main government building in the Ukrainian capital, Kiev. They began the fires last night, escalating the protests, throwing in rubber tires and whatever other debris they could find as riot police looked on. It's in stark contrast to the relatively peaceful demonstrations that began in November after Yanukovych scrapped a key treaty with the European Union, opting to secure a bailout package from Russia. The demonstrations became violent after Yanukovych passed an anti-protest law last week. At least 2 people have been killed in the rioting in Kiev. Yesterday, at a meeting with church leaders, Yanukovych said key decisions would be made at a special session of parliament next Tuesday, including reshuffling the government and amending the anti-protest law. But opposition leaders, who met with European Union officials in Kiev, weren't satisfied.
To change just ministers is not enough. People want to change the rules. It's everybody, no. You can't find the justice in our country. It's the system is totally corrupt.
The opposition leadership spoke with EU Enlargement Commissioner Stefan Füle about the possibility of international mediation for the talks with the Ukrainian government.
Great to have someone, high-profile envoy from the European Union, who is to participate as a middleman in these talks and who is credible among the opposition and the government.
But for his part, President Yanukovych has given no indication he'd be open to mediation for the talks. Alan Brooknia, TVB News.
Syrian government and opposition delegations had their first meeting with international mediator Lakhdar Brahimi today, aimed at mapping out the country's future. It lasted about a half hour. Brahimi said earlier he didn't expect the process to be easy. It's hoped the talks will launch political negotiations aimed at ending Syria's almost 3-year conflict that's seen more than 100,000 people killed. The 2 sides were distant going into the talks. The Damascus delegation denied it agreed to a transitional leadership to replace President Bashar al-Assad. The opposition says it will accept nothing less. Talks are scheduled to resume later today. Brahimi said the 2 delegations will remain in Geneva throughout the weekend.
As the Winter Olympics in Sochi approach, a terrorist crackdown in nearby Dagestan is reportedly taking place to ensure any threat to the security of the Games is removed. Here's NBC News with the story.
The bombers who pulled off those attacks in Volgograd last month, the missing Black Widows, even the Boston Marathon attack, all trace back to Dagestan. But why has this remote republic become the heart of extremism in Russia? Our first impression of Dagestan is of a drab, poor place. Soviet architecture, no jobs. But increasingly, hardline mosques are drawing young people in, preaching Al-Qaeda's radical message. This mosque is where Boston bomber Tamerlan Tsarnaev came to pray. The imam here didn't know Tamerlan, he says, but he told us the mosque is now watched by police, and the men who worship here sometimes just disappear. They join terrorist groups or are snatched by police. All of these mothers have sons who are missing. They accuse President Putin of sending young Muslim men to the gulag. It's from this anger that Black Widows are made.
While the Russian government denies it's responsible for the disappearances here in Dagestan, human rights groups say there is no other explanation. Some of the detainees are never seen again, but others end up in jail after having confessed to terrorism. And who else but the government, the groups say, could arrange that?
Human rights activist Suraj Yatsin Datsayev documented more than 50 suspicious abductions in Dagestan last year. The security services just don't want to work properly, he says. They prefer to abduct people rather than bring them to court. The man responsible for security in Dagestan denies that. Whoever's responsible, dozens of young men are missing, caught up in a dragnet, their families say, to cleanse Russia's most dangerous region before the Sochi Olympics. Richard Engel, NBC News, Dagestan.
And still to come in our news tonight. 15-year free education plan gathering steam. Carrie Lam confronted by critics at Population Policy Forum. And Li Na reigns supreme down under.